and was having PTSD and didn't know it, didn't get diagnosed, or was having anger outbursts, but that person has worked their way through it, right? And their own family has forgiven them to the point that the spouse says, we don't want our children to know about this. And that person applies here. We need to warn them that the speaker will require that we put that on the website. And is that fair? Is it a fair thing to do to our veterans who served in battle, came home and suffered from PTSD and made some bad mistakes 10 years ago in the Gulf War in 2000, 1999? Is that a fair thing to do? Is that what the people of Guam want? They don't want more pediatricians. They don't want a neurosurgeon, because when he or she came back from Afghanistan, they had a break and got in a fight in a bar. And they don't want that on the website. And I don't think that necessarily goes on a website, a prior conviction 20 years ago. But Speaker Talahi is acting very dictatorial, coming to our meetings and saying, you better do it, without thinking that we have expressed concern that it
Dr. Berg,
mental.
let me just throw in here that the law does not require these things that you're making hypotheticals about. Brianna and I actually went through a number of cases, and Sienna, a number of cases in the A's, just the A's of applicants and licensees, current licensees. And, and we did like a case-by-case analysis of, does this go on the page, does this not? There's actually criteria that make it like really, and I think this was explained to the speaker today. Like, for example, to put settlements on there, they have to be within the last 5 years, they have to be 4 or more, and they have to be $30,000 or more. Of the A's that we had, I think there might have been 1, I don't remember, but if that, including these high profile ones that we're dealing with these days, we looked at some of those too. So there's a lot of stuff that actually is going to require some, it's been requiring me to look at this stuff and compare it to the law back and forth, and go, yeah, this doesn't go on, but this does, and a couple of them. So I think the speaker understands that now, but there are some high profile matters that need to be reviewed and maybe reconsidered.
Well, so Rob, then are you telling me I'm misreading it, that if there is somebody is arrested for family violence, that would not be posted?
An arrest wouldn't, an arrest would not be posted.
How about convicted?
Convicted, then it becomes a question of, is it, all felonies have to be reported, and if it's a misdemeanor that may be related in any way to the practice of medicine, that would have to be published, I think, that would be a login.
So that's what I'm getting at is, I think those, if you're looking at a felony when someone was 20 years old and they're now 50, it still gets posted. And I think
it's also authorized that they can post their own exculpatory statement if they want to as well.
I understand that, but the issue is that if someone has those things that are in there, I think there will be physicians who are perfectly good and well suited for this community who may have had a chance to turn their lives around 30 years ago and don't want that on the website. That's my conviction.
Well, yes, but those are hypotheticals that are not confronting the speaker or the people of Guam at the moment.
But we need to let people know if they're applying, that if they get approved for an emergency temporary license, or I don't know if it's emergency temporary or permanent, that we are then obligated to ask them about any and all convictions that they have had.
Yes.
30 years ago.
You're obligated to ask that, and the people have spoken through legislation, through the legislators, and have said, yeah, we want to know. And we, and I don't believe, this is my thinking that I think is shared by the legislature on this, is that there's no longer any balancing between what you did 5 years ago, if it's egregious enough. We're not talking about a DUI or something like that. We're talking about some of these high profile cases. There's no longer a balancing between, do we need this on the island? Do we need this person because we're strapped, we're low, we don't have enough of these physicians. There's no longer, this isn't the 90s anymore, or the 80s, or the early 2000s. I know it's impossible to attract doctors. The same thing with lawyers. Okay?
Well, I think what I'm getting at is that, as far as I know, no other jurisdiction will post a conviction from 20 years ago. or 30 years ago. There are physicians who are 60 who've been practicing for 30 years.
That may be, but no other jurisdiction already had the reputation of being some easy place to come in and get access to and get licensed in. That wasn't true before.
Where are you coming up with that concept that we were an easy place to get a license?
No, I'm saying it's a reputation that it's just a reputation that all the boards have. It's like, oh, you know, if you get washed up and you can't practice in any of the states, go to Guam. And that's just a rumor, you know, that's just it's a reputation.
Although it's similar to what Phil said, is how many have we given to people who, or the senator said, I don't want people coming to be licensed here who can't be licensed elsewhere. That's fixing something that doesn't exist. We don't give
Matt, I would propose looking at this from a different perspective. I think we need to look at this from the perspective of transparency and accountability. If you're the physician who is applying here, that you would be open to being honest about your record. And the records have to do with disciplinary actions that relate to your competence or your character.
You have a felony conviction of any sort 30 years ago, we are the only jurisdiction that says as soon as you get your license, we will post that conviction on our website.
What I'm saying is that if you did that, no matter how long ago, you should own it. And you should be willing to be open about it to the public. And you let the public decide, you know, if they will trust you.
Why does no
I'm
other
sorry.
Why doesn't California do it?
Nat, there is a list of all the states, and of the 50 states that are there, 40 post a full history of disciplinary actions online. So this is not, okay, so this is not about us being the outlier, right? So I think if the issue is what are the criteria for what is posted, that is certainly something that we can discuss and all come to a consensus about with the senators. But the entire concept of having, but let me finish. But the entire concept of having an easily accessible public database that will allow the public to make an informed choice of which physician they will entrust with their care is a good one. And I know that you will all agree with me, right? So if the issue is what's put in there, it's the specifics or the technicalities, that is something that we can all arrive at a consensus with the legislators. But the idea of having this accountability mechanism, I think, is very critical. I also wanted to put in the records that I would also respectfully propose a different interpretation of the public hearing. That in fact we are not in a contentious relationship with Senator Terlaje and the senators, but in fact that they requested this because they want to know how they can assist the GBME to be more effective. And I think we need to view it from that lens so that we can take advantage of the synergies that come from that and from the assistance that can come from the legislative side in things such as honing the language of the requirements of what's to be posted on the website.
The issue with it is that we are already required to do so. And I don't think that you're right that other states, of course, all states have to report disciplinary action, or 40 agreed to report them all, but I don't think they report all felonies from 30 years ago on their websites.
Dr. Berg, you're talking about changing the law.
Yes.
So, I mean, you know, the board, I think, you know, can say this is too onerous, and it can come together and say, look, we proposed different language and we'd like to see different language on this part. I think I would, you know, I can see some parts of it that, you know, could be changed as well, but not, we don't want to give the legislature the impression that we ignore laws we don't like.
We're going to do it, but I think, first of all, the FSMB looked at this and said it's a bad law and it's not possible to comply with it unless, and even if it were possible, the cost would be prohibitive. So it's not me speaking. The FSMB has already written a letter saying this is not a good law. That's ignored.
The question is, can we comply with it or not? And
Yeah.
it is very difficult and onerous to do it. I spent a whole half a Friday just looking through a half a dozen cases and discussing them with Sienna and Brianna and saying, okay, let me think about this. So yeah, it's hard, and we're gonna need some training on what goes in and what stays out. That's true. And
But my point was that it certainly did, the sense was not that there was an effort to try and help us. It was to say, why do you only have 50 or 60? The issue is, if it's taking you that long, Rob, to look at 5 or 6 cases, there's something wrong. It should be clarified and made simple. But I do think, because we are indeed not, we are an outlier in posting all convictions, even if they were 30 years ago, that we inform applicants of that, so that those who may not.
that you can do, put it on the webpage in red blinking lights. Be advised. Here's the law on what we have to report.
That's my point.
And the resolution is to try and fix the law and improve it, right?
Correct.
And the way to do that is to have a collegial relationship with the legislature, which is the one that can change the law. So I'm just saying that the path out of this is to work in partnership with the speaker and her office so that we can get the law revised and improved to the point where it becomes reasonable, where it becomes consistent with recommendations by the FSMB.
That's a good idea, and we can pursue that. But I think it's already been notified by the FSMB that it didn't make sense, and the FSMB offered to help to straighten it out, and no efforts were made to that effect.
So we can revisit that, and I think it comes through a collegial relationship,
and we shall.
right?
The issue is, I think at this point is that we cannot, we can discuss it
All
now.
right, can I jump in?
Yeah,
Okay, we're talking over each other too much. We're talking at instead of to. I think a couple things. First, that session, the oversight hearing with a Speaker Talai was recorded. Brianna, see if we can get a copy of it. I don't know, Dropbox or whatever. And I
It's
think it would
available on
behoove all of
YouTube.
us to watch the session.
Phil, it's
It is.
available
Could
on
you send that
YouTube.
link around?
Sure.
Okay, would you send that link around? All right, great. That's number one. Number two, we've talked about the regulation, or I haven't read it. So, Sienna or Brianna, can you send us all a link to the copy of the law, which we're discussing? But I think part of it is that we haven't put down very many the information on very many of our physicians, and so they would think then that we don't care about the law. We'll just go ahead and do it, go on. So we probably should set ourselves a schedule, deadlines to when we can have everybody on. And this is not to argue what should be on, what should not be on from a physician's point of view. It's what should be on or not be on from the law's point of view. And that's where I think we have to aim ourselves. And if we need to change the language of the law, then we start working on it. I have a good relationship with almost all the legislators and can easily talk to them. And I'd be happy to do that, with other members of our board. But I can see them getting them, because you had some people in the media making it seem like we're ogres, and of course the legislature is going to react to that. But the speaker is kind of right that we've only done 60 at that point. I don't know what number we're up to now, but and I know we're so busy already. I know we're overloaded. We don't have enough money, but hello, that's government. And so I would like to see